It is very difficult to identify a single factor influencing levels of positive or negative political trust in Europe and in the wider context of Western liberal democracies. Bearing this in mind, and supported by our previous research on media literacy and the value orientations of young people in East Central Europe, the team from Metropolitan University Prague joined the TRUEDEM project consortium. We knew from our previous research that media literacy and critical thinking were important in strengthening trust and democratic resilience. We also knew that societies in the so-called new democracies of Central and Eastern Europe were less civic-minded and much more parochial. Even after almost 3 years of our joint research, disinformation, the so-called alternative media, and also the formation of echo chambers based on in-group identity and the rejection of different opinions and their proponents still seem to us to be very pressing issues. Unfortunately, many European governments do not pay enough attention to this challenge, and some even resort to creating and sharing disinformation themselves. The work package led by our team primarily focused on the issues of polarization and the formation of new cleavages. Polarization is almost always based on an element of mistrust. We therefore view the distinction between the two types of polarization, the ideological and affective, as a significant conceptual challenge. We started from the assumption that sufficiently visible cleavages based on conflict between democratic ideologies are absolutely essential for democracy. It is also essential that there exists a centripetal conflict between different positions and poles within a broadly defined political mainstream seeking a consensus that is widely acceptable. Without such ideological conflict, democracy becomes static and may decline. However, we view the strengthening of affective or populist polarization, which divides European societies into two or even more irreconcilable camps, very negatively. Political trust becomes linked to direct participation in government by the supported camp, and perhaps even more so to the exclusion of the opposing side from the governance. Such affective polarization undermines trust in institutions, not only political ones, but also educational as well as the media. But where exactly lies the line between the two types of polarization? In this Manichaean situation, how should we perceive the role of the opposition, which in democracies is supposed to provide an alternative to the current government? Even after the 3 years of working on the project, we still ask ourselves whether the concepts of affective polarization and populism are being stretched too far. We consider our research's most insignificant finding to be the fact that the much discussed depolarization only affects a few specific domains or topics. In our research, we used a fixed effects model to analyze the relationship between party system polarization and trust in political institutions, regressing our outcome variables on our quantitative measure of ideological party polarization. Our results show significant relationship between party system polarization and trust in political institutions for two domains. Notably, we got negative and significant estimates for the domain freedom and democracy, for the outcome variables trust in political parties and parliaments. These results indicate that public trust in political parties and parliaments tends to decrease when parties are more polarized on the issues regarding freedom and democracy. This phenomenon may be related to the recent rise of the challenger outsider parties. In order to win voter support, challenger outsider parties need to find a niche through which they can engage voters and break through. However, as a result of the former ideological convergence of the established parties, the challenger outsider parties have often to adopt strong anti-establishment, anti-institutional, and therefore more extreme positions to attract voters, thereby increasing the ideological party polarization. Moreover, once successful, these parties will continue to emphasize the issues that enabled them to gain parliamentary representation, which will not go unchallenged by the established political parties, more vigorously defending their original positions and warning of the threats associated with the entry of the challenger outside the parties, thus further increasing ideological party polarization. Our research, which included more than 30 interviews and 3 focus groups, has shown us that a very pressing problem for contemporary democracies is how to deal with information. Traditional media outlets are increasingly being replaced by social networks, which are not subject to the same content and ethical standards. The lack of effective media content regulation, coupled with the systemic dissemination of disinformation by domestic and foreign actors, represents a significant shortcoming that hinders efforts to strengthen democratic resilience. While post-war democracies have found effective legal, political and educational tools to marginalize undemocratic political actors, these will also need to be adapted to combat the new forms of weakening or denying the liberal democratic nature of European political regimes.